Welcome to the HU Move Makers podcast, where we highlight folks that are blazing the trail and making moves in Howard culture. Today we have a very, very special guest. Very special guest in Black history. Very special guest in Howard history. She has her master's from Howard. Did doctoral studies at Howard. Bachelor's from Central State. Harvard lecturer, Oxford lecturer, military chaplain, educator, servant leader, head of faith and family ministries at Sanctuary at Mount Calvary Church. All the way from Youngstown, Ohio, ladies and gentlemen, Omarosa Manigault Newman. Well, Miss Omarosa, thank you for coming to the show. I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you so much. So first, I just want to ask, where do you get your confidence from? Because I've seen you in some tough interviews, just in researching you, and you kind of thrive in those situations. Like I kind of see you like light up in those situations. Where do you get that from? Because a lot of times you're outnumbered and you don't feed into it. You kind of stay even keel and you kind of come in trying to control your own narrative. Where does that come from?
I think my first degree came from the School of Hard Knocks. When you think about it, I grew up in the Westlake Projects. I grew up in an environment where you had to be smart, you had to be quick on your feet, you had to be tough, you had to be resilient. And so when I get myself in those situations, I can really pull from my life experiences, and I'm not intimidated by anyone. So when you go into an interview with Dr. Phil, or you go on the Today Show or the Tonight Show, or any of these shows where these hosts have their own little agenda, I always keep the main thing, and that really is being empowered to tell my own story and not allow them to create a narrative that perpetuates in some ways stereotypes or boxes us in. So I never allow that to happen to me.
So I want to talk about that. I had a really fun time just reading your bio and just researching you on YouTube and, of course, all on social media. I first learned about you, obviously, from The Apprentice, but then, of course, there's so much more, obviously, being a Howard grad and working in the White House.
2003.
Okay, 2003. So I want to I came out in 2003 as well from Howard.
No. I did The Apprentice in 2003. I'm a little bit.
Well, you know what? I taught entrepreneurship before I opened up my insurance agency. I was an entrepreneurship teacher. So a part of my class, I would allow my students to watch like different segments of The Apprentice. So got to know you, at least from that level, pretty well. So one thing I do want to ask, how does a young lady like yourself, young Black girl from Youngstown, Ohio, how do you make it all the way to the White House and beyond?
Well, I'm always reminded that Christ is the author and finisher of our faith. He is truly writing my life story, and you really can't make this stuff up. To grow up in the environment that I grew up in, to have such tragedies in my life. My father was murdered when I was 7, and my mother had to go work 3 jobs just to kind of make it happen for her 4 children. And so when you ask about Youngstown, I appreciate that because it allows me to kind of reflect on just how far Christ has brought me in my life and how much grace and mercy he has provided for me through all of these different experiences. But truly, I would have to attribute it to faith in Christ, a very strong mother, and a support system that never gave up on me, even when I felt disappointed or rejected. They kept encouraging me and telling me that I could do it.
So as a young girl growing up in Youngstown, and you said your father died at such an early age, what type of impact did that have on you? When it happened, did you actually realize, like, did you internalize that? When that happened, what type of effect did it have on you?
Yeah, at 7, I was daddy's little girl, and I absolutely loved my father. He was smart and brilliant and charismatic. And so the loss of his life was so profound on who I was as an individual. I have to tell you that I remember so vividly that time after his passing, because it was almost like a light switch went off and on, in terms of the reality of what we were facing. And so I knew that, at that age, life isn't fair. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there are people who are watching who have had these incredible losses in their life. I've been studying some research, Joshua, about post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a whole body of research about post-traumatic growth, meaning you go through something traumatic and you can absolutely have the stress and those types of symptoms. But there are people who go through something so tough and so hard in their lives that they actually grow from it instead of, allowing it to break them down or stop them. And that's exactly how I feel about the experience of losing my father at such a young age.
Yeah, my condolences to that. I got to experience my father for about 25 years. I couldn't imagine, that happened at 7. So even at 7, I mean, coming from Youngstown, obviously, not the safest place, in the US. But you made it out. As a little girl, what were some of your passions and things that you wanted to achieve later?
Well, I grew up with two older brothers and my sister. My older brothers were into wrestling. They liked to fight. They were tough. I mean, they would take me with them when they went to go play basketball. They took me when they were going to go fight. They took me everywhere. They had to because my mother was working and I was the annoying little sister. And so I was into what they were into. So, flag football, tag football.
Were you always outspoken even as a little girl?
I had to be because my brothers loved to joan, play the dozens or whatever, and they were always kind of cracking on me or whatever, and so I had to have those quick comebacks. The reason why I'm not sensitive about people who make fun of my name is because I heard it all before I left the house. My brothers were very, very creative, and so it builds this resiliency in you if you really can pull from those experiences of having tough brothers who put me in headlocks and I could fight. I mean, and yes, I always had a little sass because as a younger child, you always have to find your voice in a crowd.
Mhm.
You grow up in a big family. I have 62 first cousins who are going to watch this and love the shout out to Youngstown. And we
Wow.
all grew up together. We went to school together. I had 7 cousins in my same grade when I was growing up in Youngstown. And so we always kind of had each other's back, but we all had that Walker sass. I mean,
Wow, that's dope to hear. So, one thing I noticed is that you have a deep, deep passion and love for HBCUs. Um, when you first, your first choice, well, you went to Central State, but you did later make up for that mistake by coming to Howard. But I do want to ask what made you go the Central State route?
I visited a lot of schools. I was a high school volleyball star. I was going to say athlete, but I'll not be humble because of life right now. And so I loved volleyball, and so I traveled to different schools for my visits. Went to Ohio State.
Oh, really? So you were really good.
I was.
Okay. I'm about to. I could look it up on Google.
You know what? I'll send you some pictures because I love my teammates and I loved being a Lady Marauder. But I was a setter, and Central State appreciated my skills as a setter. Everybody else wanted to turn me into outside hitter because of my height. And I wanted to set, and a setter is kind of like a quarterback on a team, and that's the position I wanted to play.
So you were a student athlete at Central State.
I was a student athlete. I was also ROTC at Central State, so I was
Oh,
a part
wow.
of the Marauder while I was a student athlete, and I was also a personality on the radio station. So I had a full plate while I was at Central. But one of the things that I loved about Central State was, unlike the other schools I visited, I wasn't just a number.
Mm-hmm.
The coach, really just did an incredible job kind of advertising the culture of HBCUs, the nurturing culture. And Central State was exactly what I needed at that time. I didn't want to be far from my family. And
How far is Central State from Youngstown?
about 4.5 hours. So I could get,
Okay.
like I said, I came from a big family. I didn't want to be very far away from them. And so, yes, Central State was my choice. And I had the most incredible 4 years. I ended up being Miss Central State University, which is
So around what time? This is like 19 what that you're at Central State?
what years though? I mean, I went to Central State in 1992.
92. Okay. So 92. So Central State, you student athlete, ROTC, you on the radio station.
And Miss Central State. Thank you.
And what else?
Miss Central State.
Oh, excuse me. And Miss Central State. Okay. Okay. I'll make a note of that. So you're doing your thing when you're there. So while you're there, you know, what are some of the what's going through your mind in terms of career or networking, or are you always the ambitious Omarosa that we know today? How did that kind of develop?
You know, I mentioned that I had an incredible support system. And so my first semester, I had an incredible professor that took me under their wings. But first, I have to mention the librarian, Miss Jocelyn Dabney, who helped me get to Central State. And that carried on when I got to Central, because she also was connected to the campus in some ways and helped me with the support system in the form of her sister who lived near the campus. But when I got there, I had a professor who just kind of took me under his wings and saw my skills on the radio and television. I knew I was going to be on TV like that.
You knew it.
I wasn't just majoring in radio and TV because I had a dream. I knew I was going to be on TV. I minored in business because I'm always about my money, but my major was radio and TV. And I absolutely loved it. I was 100% laser focused on my career to be, don't laugh, I was going to be a meteorologist.
Hey, you only got to be right like 2% of the time. That's not a bad profession.
But I was going to pursue that because, you know, that's what I wanted to do. But as life would have it, I also had a lot of opportunities because my professor was into politics, journalism and politics. And so he made me focus on writing. And so I established my writing skills very, very young when I was at Central. And so he said, you can be on TV, but you have to know how to write.
So what type of student were you at Central? I know you're well-rounded. What were the grades like?
I was an A student. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Okay, you're A student. Okay.
I remember very distinctly when I knew I was coming to Howard because my professor, Emil Dansker, brought me to DC for the Black Radio Conference. And we stayed at Howard Hotel.
Rest in peace. Yeah. Rest in peace to the Howard Hotel.
At Howard Hotel. And I remember the first time I was on the yard and I was like, why didn't anybody tell me about this? Because since at that time, Howard's volleyball team wasn't actively recruiting at that point. And so I didn't know that they had a volleyball team that I should have considered. But they've since built, you know, Howard has a great volleyball program now. But back then it was
We're 5-time MEAC champs, 5 straight. The last 5 MEAC titles we've won. Just want to let you know that.
Yeah, no, I know. There's actually 2 of the students that I encouraged to go to Howard have gone through that program. And yes, I'm a little biased towards encouraging people to play volleyball. But at any rate, I remember getting on the yard and saying, I'm coming here to do my master's and my doctorate. Like really? I knew. I applied my junior year at Central State for Howard University.
So did you go straight from college to master's?
Great. Yes.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Okay. So cool. I'm glad you said that. So we can skip over Central State since this is a Howard. But you know, shout out to Central State. I'm sure it's a great school. I'm sure it was amazing. I'm sure it was awesome. But I want you to paint for me when you get on Howard's campus, and this is, sorry for bringing up years, but it just helps me a little bit better. So this is like 19 what?
96. Thank you very much.
Okay, in 96. I mean, this is like legendary homecoming. This is like Biggie. This is like all of that. So when you step on campus, paint a picture of what it was like. Even though you're in the master's program, just paint a picture of what that scene is like at Howard at that time.
Well, as soon as I graduated, I went to go and cover the Olympics. You remember that year? It was the Olympics in Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
I covered the Democratic and Republican conventions. So I was a working journalist at that point.
Oh, not too bad. Not too shabby.
Conventions project, which brought me to DC as well a lot because I was covering politics at that point. So I was on a little earlier. looking for housing because I was a grad student.
So
And
you
I was so,
were covering the Olympics and while you're a student at Howard?
well, no, that was the summer. You asked me if I went straight through.
Oh, okay, got it.
Summer of 96. I found housing, guess where? At the Divinity School.
Oh,
Couldn't afford the towers.
man, of all the places to find housing.
That's pretty divine.
Yeah.
But I found housing at the Divinity School because I don't know if you remember, they were housing graduate students there in addition to Divinity students. And so I got that housing in the summer. And so I was able to move in early. And I was so thrilled to be at Howard University. It was incredible.
What made you kind of fall in love with Howard? If you can just kind of sum it up briefly, what was that picture like when you walk on campus?
Howard Howard is just being on campus and being a person that kind of the person that I am, the personality I have, where I'm into everything. So I was into politics. I was ROTC. I was an athlete. I was into radio, TV, the station, the newspaper, the student station. There was a program called Spotlight. I don't know if you remember that.
No, that's a little bit before me, but I love to learn about it.
Josh, don't try to carry me now. I won a spot hosting on Spotlight on WHUT. I mean, it was just like this smorgasbord.
Mm-hmm.
I can't explain when I got there the resources because, like you said, Central is a little smaller school. When you get to Howard and all those resources are there, and you really can put your hands into everything. I dove right in, and I found my Mecca.
Nice. So what was your major in? What were you getting a master's in at Howard at that time?
My master's was in communication with the focus on radio and television.
Okay, nice. So you're at Howard. You're taking it in. You're at the Mecca basically. So throughout this time, how are you going about building your brand? Because obviously, to come from where you come from, I would imagine that things don't happen overnight. Are you intentional about building your brand at this point?
Yes, and again, it comes from just having an incredible village of people who said, you're in DC, so these need to meet, and this is the work you need to do. And so that fall, I had an opportunity to do some volunteering with the DNC, and I was fortunate enough to work the inauguration. I mean, I was doing things that I just don't think a lot of students get an opportunity to do, or maybe they do. But my experience at Howard that first year was incredible because I dove right into politics and journalism, and I got to do some work with USA Today. I got to do something.
Was politics always a passion, or did that come from being in DC?
I come from a political environment. Ohio is a battleground state, and my pastor at the time was such an activist, and he was always involved in civil rights and the movement, unions and the politics of unions in Youngstown. A lot of my family worked in the factories and the steel mills, and so it's a political environment. It's kind of in your DNA, and so I knew that if I was going to the nation's capital, that I would be involved somehow in the Democratic Party, politics somehow, some way. I didn't expect that a year later I would be working in a White House, but again, that's God and that's favor. But
so
yeah.
it sounds like when you were at Howard, what's cool about your story being a grad student, because you're the only person I've had so far that went to Howard for grad school. You were kind of you were able to be intentional. You know how you're an undergrad, you kind of like social more so. It seems like you were being intentional about, hey, I'm in DC, White House, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm in DC, I'm gonna go ahead and be in the School of C. How did you get to the White House?
Well, before you skip over, I need to be intentional as I also was fresh out of college. So I was still in the mind state of a college senior.
Okay.
Howard's campus. And so I indulged a bit in terms of the party scene, the concerts, homecoming. I mean, I got there fall of 96. Homecoming was amazing. I still remember it like it was yesterday. So as intentional as I was, like an extension of my senior year, because I indulged a lot.
Well, what's like a favorite Howard memory that you have?
Oh, well, you mentioned Puff. I mean, Sean Combs would come down on the yard a lot. Biggie was on the yard. I mean, I sound ancient saying these names, but it was real. So many just incredible personalities would come. I remember Nas came to the yard.
Mm-hmm.
Nas hair, so I lost it. Any, not just rappers or whatever, but any of the entertainers or politicians that came for whatever lecture, I was always kind of studying the hilltop to see who was going to come where, and I was there. So if they said Debbie Allen was on the yard, I was there. If they said Felicia Rashad was on the yard, I was there. Whoever was on the yard. I remember Ozzie Davis, Ruby D came on campus to do a lecture, and I was like, I'm there. I was
Yeah.
fast to go hear them. So I have so many
What
incredible
do you think like differentiates Howard from a lot of other HBCUs?
access to power. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's easy to invite the President of the United States or the senator or the head of the Department of Justice, because of where we're located.
Yeah.
You so much access to people. Instead of having to get on the plane to come to Howard, they simply drive 3.5, 4 miles to the yard, and then they can engage with the students. And so that access to power really differentiates our campus from a lot of HBCUs.
Big time. Yeah. I've gotten to see, I remember, I think I was my freshman or sophomore year when Jay-Z came and performed. I mean, that was,
Wait a minute, what year were you on? Because I remember JC.
I was there from 99 to '03.
Okay, I was
So,
teaching.
I mean, Jay-Z, DMX,
Yeah,
LL Cool J. I mean,
I was teaching at that point. I was a teaching assistant in grad school at that point.
okay.
I
All
just
right.
got there.
So School of C. So you repping the School of C. So what? So you graduate. You get your master's from the School of C. In terms of a career move, what's your career move that you what's your first career move? I know you did some reporting in the Olympics, and you transitioned to the White House. Is that like the next career move that you do?
No, I had to do a practicum in your master's degree. Instead of an internship, you do a practicum. And I did a practicum at the Department of Commerce. And
Okay.
because I was at that point, I had shifted into ownership of radio and TV, and I had gone into telecom policy with my research. My master's is in on the Telecom Act of 1996, Section 254 was kind of my focus. And so I went to the Department of Commerce, did my practicum, and was able to kind of do some networking. And in addition to that, I was volunteering at different events and things at the DNC. And my mentor said, what are you going to do? Doris Crenshaw, what are you going to do after you graduate? And I told her I hadn't figured it out. And so she got me into advancing at the White House. So I was doing advanced work, not paid, it's kind of like a voluntary logistic position. And I was doing advanced trips my last semester at Howard University. So I advance in-town trips for the vice president or the president. And so when I was getting ready to graduate,
So what are advanced trips? What are
advance,
those?
you literally go in advance of the principal to set up all the logistics for that particular presidential or vice presidential event.
And you got that opportunity from Howard,
From my mentor,
for
Doris.
your mentor. Can you just talk about the importance of having a mentor or a sponsor, just to help you reach your goals? And how does somebody, how did that relationship start?
Well, my relationship with Doris Crenshaw started because I was working nights at the front desk of an apartment building. When I was at Howard, that was my night job, was just sitting there letting people into a building. And I met her. It was a really high profile building called the Landsberg. And I met her and she said, you shouldn't be sitting at the front desk. And I said, well, I'm a student. This is the only time I can work. And I sit here and I get to study and I get to make photocopies and all that stuff. And she said, you should come work for me. And so I got off the desk and I started working for her. And she was a very powerful civil rights lobbyist. And again,
Nice.
favor, nothing but favor. And she was incredibly nurturing. She was tough. She doesn't mince words, and she really kind of directed me and helped to kind of focus my political journey. And she single-handedly helped me get my job in the White House.
Wow. So at what point do you get in the White House? That's got to be crazy given your story from coming from Youngstown. I mean, I know you've always been, doing it big, Miss Central State and all of that.
I was first runner-up to Howard, by the way. Little known Howard fact.
Oh, really?
I was first runner-up to Asha.
Asha, I'm interviewing her this weekend.
I was her first runner-up. Tell her I said hello.
Asha's from Chicago too. She's my mentor. Yeah. So Asha, I think she was 2 years or 3 years ahead of me when I was at Howard. So yeah.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
At Miss Howard, and by the way, she should have been Miss Howard University.
Like, how did you look at people like me who were just like going through the motions when you're just doing all this amazing stuff? Like, were you like, peon?
Dean Harvey was there when you were there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Dean Harvey is the reason I've been able to teach at Howard for the last 10 years.
Okay.
He's incredible. The reason you were so focused is because the School of Business has so much going on that I'm sure, I'm trying to help you, Josh. I'm sure we can't do anything else besides all of the incredible activities at the school would be.
I want to redo, because that's not, I mean, when I talk, people like, yeah, I had this job with student government. And then after that, I'm like, really? And that was paid? I didn't know that.
I'm so grateful for my teaching assistantship. I needed that check. I needed the tuition. I needed the housing situation. It was incredible. Yeah.
No, that's dope. I like that. So when do you get to the White House, and what are you doing when you get there?
Okay, I graduate in 98, of course, and my commencement speaker was none other than Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Wow.
Can't even make this up.
Hillary Rodham Clinton. Wow.
My commencement speaker. And because I knew the advance team that was advancing her before my commencement, I actually went up to the president's office and spoke to her while they were roping her.
Oh, rub it in. Rub it in.
No. I'm just saying that I have a typical Howard University experience because the entire advance team are my friends, and Hillary Rodham Clinton is my speaker. And then I go back out to sit there with the graduates. I listened to her incredible speech. And 2 weeks after that, I got a phone call about an opening in the vice president's office. And Doris Crenshaw hooked me up. And after I cleared my background, which took about a couple of months, I was in the White House that summer after I graduated from Howard.
And what type of work are you doing at that point?
At that point, I was in the advance office. I was in scheduling in advance. I kept doing advance, mainly press advance, which is, as it sounds, you go and set up the press credentials, press risers, access, work with Secret Service for security issues regarding the press, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm in Vice President Gore's office for about 10 months.
I heard, and Gore, he invented the internet, right? Gore? Sorry, that was a sidebar, but go ahead.
I have a lot of bosses you can make fun of, by the way, in this interview, starting with Gore.
Okay, so yeah, what are you doing in the White House?
Scheduling events. I stay there for 10 months, and then an opening comes up in the Office of Presidential Personnel with a guy named Charlie Duncan, God rest his soul. And I got to go work for Charlie Duncan in PPO, which is Bill Clinton's office, and I was Deputy Associate Director down there. I loved that job. I loved going to the hearings for confirmations. I loved working with all the candidates that were looking to get appointed. It was great. It was great. I got to interview candidates. I got to see their backgrounds, their background checks, which helped teach me a lot, by the way, of working.
What type of things going, like, are they looking for other than like the obvious stuff when they do a background check?
Well, the obvious stuff comes up over and over again. Here's some advice. If you want to work in politics, pay your nanny. Do not get an illegal cleaning lady. Above the table, not below the table, period. Pay your taxes, period. Pay your taxes.
So that stuff comes back to haunt you later.
I can't even tell you, Joshua, how many candidates sat in front of me, brilliant candidates who had sketchy cleaning lady, au pair, nannies. You're
just a savage. That's a savage when you can't even pay the cleaning lady over the table. You got all that money, you can't even pay the cleaning lady.
They can get away with it. And also, part two, just because you get something expunged, it is not expunged from the United States government. We see everything. We see the library book that you didn't turn in. in your junior year. Like all of that comes up in your background check. That's all. That's my advice if you want to work in government.
So I want to ask a question. And so you from Youngstown, you go to Central State, you go to Howard, black, black. You're immersed in black culture, but then you go to the White House. Was there ever any like culture shock that you kind of went through, or any type of feeling where you had to be on in a situation? Because when I graduated from Howard, I struggled in corporate America. Like it was just hard for me to adapt to that, to being the one guy, and coming up with conversation. It just wasn't natural for me. Did you ever have a struggle like that?
Well, I was one of the few African American women in Gore's office. So when I first got to the White House, that was a little strange. I believe there was maybe one other sister that worked in that office. However, when I went on the Clinton side, as you know, he appointed a lot of African Americans. I mean, Alexis Herman, Rodney Slater, Mignon Moore. There were a ton of powerful African Americans who served in the Clinton administration. But at first, I'll admit, when I got to Gore's office, it was.
Were you there under Clinton's office when that whole scandal, that Monica Lewinsky thing? Were you there?
I knew you were going to go there.
I have to. I mean, who else gonna come on this show and be able to talk about that? Were you there?
I was there. Yes.
And that's crazy. That's crazy. What was that like? I mean, you don't have to go into great detail, but the man was like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. I mean, that was heard and repeated so many times, and then he like admitted it, and then his ratings increase after he admits it. But then Hillary like saves him in that interview that they did when she kind of like had his back. But what was it like?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's ever good for the country to go through an impeachment, and particularly to go through an impeachment over that, way before the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
Everywhere I went, there was a joke about a cigar and a blue dress, and I did not have, like you hear these things everywhere I went. It was the talk of the town, and it was tough.
Man.
And impeachment was tough because
did it make you look at him like a little bit different? Like, damn, Bill, you too?
Yeah, it was different.
Or was you like, I knew it?
Well, when he stood up and said, he didn't do it, then we all went out and said he didn't do it. And then it turns around that he did do it. And so then we look stupid.
Damn.
And so I learned back then that, politicians lie. That's it. They lie.
They do, apparently. Because what do you think about Hillary, though? I mean, for her to kind of have his back like that, do you think you could have been that strong to hold your man down like that?
Nah.
That's tough.
It was because that was such a public humiliation. But they have a different. You should never get into nor can you understand the inner workings of a marriage, that type of relationship. For me personally, it would have been a wrap if my husband had that kind of relationship with this young woman, an intern, because I can't deal with the humiliation. But obviously, Hillary Clinton is a stronger woman to have endured that and to persevere.
Yeah, for real.
Would be, because it would have been over. He'd have
been. All of Youngstown would have been up in the White House acting a fool. The three strikes you out. A lot of, now that of course a lot of people at the time say, man, that was a good bill. It had a lot of good things in it. And then you fast forward to how many, black folks were locked up as a result of that. In some sense, I think it pushed a lot of people to support, to really not like Hillary and Bill, because so many black folks, were locked up, and it pushed them to be the more conservative route. I mean, what are your views on that bill?
At the time that was happening, there was so much going on in the country. And so to put things into context, crime levels were at its highest. I can speak personally about Youngstown. At the time, they were talking about it being the murder capital of Ohio and up in the highest levels of murder per capita in the country. And so I was looking forward to any kind of relief in terms of reducing the crime in the community that I love. I'm not saying that I endorsed that crime bill, because that was that was passed right before I got there.
Because he's a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, Bill, you got to know you're gonna lock up all these black folks. You got to know that.
Well, I distinctively remember a whole lot of black folks that kind of co-signed that bill, by the way. It didn't pass by itself.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of support from members of the Congressional Black Caucus and civil rights group for that particular bill.
That's right. Name names. Who are they? Who are these people?
I just wanted to think that I was the only black person sitting up there going, oh, this is interesting. You know, I think that that you have to put it into context, that politics is not, it's not a neat kind of area. It's messy. And there are a lot of dynamics that people don't realize is going to have an impact on the community. And I think it's unfortunate, because I also remember when she called African-American super predators. And we over and over.
She started that, and she kind of created that whole like feeling, like, because I was watching some special, and like you just said, when she came out with that word, it was like a lot of outlets started saying that, and it kind of like made people, I guess, fear black men.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, and it's unfortunate. But hey, in politics, you say stupid things. Trust me, I've had that experience. And it stays with you. And I think that that's one of the things that will stay with her.
Man, that's tough. So was it like, did you ever watch that show House of Cards? Was it like House of Cards in there?
It was like House of Cards meets West Wing meets, you know, one of those weird, you know, movies about the White House all together.
Man.
But it was a wild time, but it was also a very prosperous time for the country. If you remember, the economy was exceptional. Home ownership was at an all-time high. You know, the advances that the president was making in domestic policy issues that impacted the communities that I cared about, like empowerment zones. I mean, all of that was happening during that administration. So impeachment was happening, and all of these other policy issues that were very impactful on the Black community was happening at the same time.
So would you say that the Clinton administration did a good job for our culture? If you had to grade them, like, what type of grade would you give them?
Oh, not the grading scale. Well, because now that I have, 20 years since I've been removed from that, I can reflect on some of the things that were not so good, but I can also reflect on things that were really, really good for African Americans. And I think empowerment zones are probably one of the best initiatives that came out of that. Home ownership. Yeah, I'll just stop there.
You're in the White House. You're moving up. You're building your brand. You said you were, what was it called where you set up the press? I forgot what it's called again.
I was press advance, and then I was in PPO as well.
Okay, so press advance and PPO. So how long were you working under that administration?
2 years.
Nice.
Till the end, and then I went out on Gore's campaign, and that's when I got to work with Donna Brazile. She was the campaign manager for Al Gore, for my old boss.
Wow. So tell me about why do you think so many people, I guess, took an interest in you? Because when I look at when I hear your name or read about you or see you, like, I have to click and see what people are saying. Like, I just have to. Why do you think that people are taking an interest in Omarosa at right now, helping with presidential campaigns? Because prior to this, I mean, you're at Howard, you're doing stuff, but what makes people want to take an interest in you, especially it's the highest office in the land? People work their whole life in politics and don't even get to that level. Why you?
Why me?
Because you're still in your 20s at this point, right?
Yeah, you like to talk about age.
Because I just want people to know who you are and how you got to wherever. I just don't want people to be, because so many, like when I was researching you, everything is like Trump, apprentice.
it's
like
so
every little thing.
people act like I was lucky to get an
Yeah.
away. Like, I've worked my entire life to, be where I am and do what I've done. I mean, it was crazy.
Well, that's what I want to do. Tell the whole story. I know that you probably got stuff to do, but to me,
I mean,
when I tell people, Barack Obama, he didn't become president. Like that started way back when he was a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like,
and if you want to go in politics, when you talk about being intentional, to go through a background check like you go through to work around the president of the United States, it's an intensive look into your life. And I've been through 2 of those background checks. And so you can't, do things that will work against you if you want to go into politics. And so as much as I wanted to kick it on another level with my friends and do certain things, I was always mindful about things that would impact where I wanted to go, because those decisions that I was making, whether that was undergrad or even grad school, would impact my ability to go and work for the president and work in the White House. And so I was always thoughtful about that.
so do you have an inner circle that you kind of wild out with? Like your circle of trust who can you can just let your hair down with beyond,
In fact, I was actually looking at homecoming pictures from last year, and I was thinking, please God, don't let the pandemic affect homecoming.
Oh man.
I was like, please. I get to see not only the people who are in my inner circle now, but I also get to reconnect with people. Do you know Miss Dudley, by the way?
Yeah, School of B.
Well, she was in the School of C, and now she's in career services. But let me just tell you, I ran into her.
Is that Carol? Wait, Carol Dudley? Oh wait, my bad. I was thinking about somebody else. Yeah, School of C. Everybody who's in the School of C who's on this show, it's like they have to bring her up.
Miss Dudley she got me an amazing job. Are you?
Because they're like I think I don't know, Howard like lost funding a few years ago or something like that.
And we all like called
yeah, it was like this big old thing. Now I was in the School of B, but yeah, I don't know her, but
it's so funny because when they sent me that email, there's a group of us that were just like, what we need to do, and we just started. Everybody started working the phone. They had no choice but to bring her back.
Wow, that's crazy.
He had an impact.
Only Howard. Only Howard.
Me for one woman, and that one woman chose the wrong person. And when I'm going to tell you, when God has favor on your life, and you've touched so many people, and her ministry has been helping people, she helped me get jobs.
Let's talk about Miss Dudley.
Let me tell you about Miss Dudley. One year, my first year, I finished, and I did not have a job for that summer. And I popped in there, as I always would do, and say, Miss Dudley, my teaching assistantship money is going to stop over the summer. I don't want to have to go back to Ohio. I don't have a whole lot of money. Can you help me find a job? And she's like, you know what? I've got something really great for you. There's a production company that's doing these historic stories about civil rights leaders and so forth. And I think you would be great. They're looking for a research director. And I was like, that's right up my alley. This job paid $65,000. That is more money than I had ever made in my entire life. And I didn't even know that's what it paid. She just sent me over there to interview with them, and I got it. And I was I can't even explain to you how happy.
Look at God. Look at God.
It was 4 months, but it was still.
Wait, it paid $65,000 in 4 months?
No, that would have been the yearly salary.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, let me call Miss Dudley right now.
It was like $6,000 a month, but it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. I was sending money home to Youngstown like I was a baller. I was like, here's some money for you, mom, grandma, cousins. Like, I was balling.
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
So grateful that Miss Dudley helped me that summer, because it helped me with student loans, with debt, housing. I was able to get my own place. I mean, it was incredible. Miss Dudley, I will never forget. And the name of the company was NVLP, National Visionary Leadership Project. Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday. And Miss McLeod, by the way,
I didn't know her.
Well, did you know Miss McLeod in Blackburn?
Oh, yes.
She was incredible. Can I just tell you a quick story? And I know we got to go.
Sure.
We would host those receptions in Blackburn, reception for this department and for that, a luncheon for this. And she would call certain students like myself on the struggle. And she'd say, hey, they're having a luncheon at 12. If you come around 1:30, I'll wrap up a plate for you.
Oh, really?
Oh, can I just...
Man, that's nice.
She fed me so much throughout my years at Howard. And it just, I can't even tell you how grateful I was to have somebody that was like, I'm going to wrap a plate for you. I know you like this and I know you like that. And I put some sliced meat. They had fruit. Oh, she would call, oh, they got the good stuff. These folks spent some money. Come on over to Blackburn. Bring some friends.
She was like Mr. Gaines, huh? From a different world. That's what's up.
She was Miss McLeod. I love her.
Yeah, I remember her. So getting back on track.
I know, this went off on a tangent, but you have to shout out people who take care of you.
Oh yeah, 100%, man, 100%. So you're on the campaign trail with Al Gore, inventor of the internet. How does that feel to be doing that, and why, and what makes you so special that they pick you to do that?
Well, at this point, I think that I had developed a skill set that was desirable. And I think it's important that you make yourself where you can't be disposed of so easily. So at this point, I went into finance. So fundraising on a campaign, as you know, the last to get fired are fundraisers because they need to keep money coming in. And so I connected with a mentor, Kevin Jefferson, and he was showing me the ropes. Terry McCullough was the head of the DNC at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing fundraising, we're working and doing all of these different events. And when you have a skill set where you can raise money for the party and for the candidate, then they see that you have, something that's of value. And that's why me.
And so this is like 2000, right?
Yeah, well, yes.
Okay. So what was it like, because I would imagine that's a lot of traveling, a lot of meeting cool people, a lot of late nights, a lot of long days. What was that like working on the presidential campaign and working with folks like Donna Brazile?
Donna Brazile, Mignon Moore, Lottie Shackelford, Regina Thomas, Alexis Herman, Dorothy Hyde. I mean, I could just name the incredible people that I had a chance to work. It was great, but I have to tell you, it was the first time that I thought a candidate that was inevitable. Like, I knew Al Gore was going to be president. There was no way that George Bush,
man,
we didn't think he was really smart. We didn't think that he had what it took. He wasn't the best speaker. I'm going to tell you, if you asked me, Joshua, if there was any way that Bush was going to be president, I was like, there's no way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if Bush was like told all in either. He was just like, yo, all right, Dad, I'm gonna do it, man. Like, all right, bet. You know what I'm saying? And then I think even Bush's brother was like, what the hell, he won? Like, it made him run. He was like, damn it, I'm gonna run too.
Well, remember, he didn't win. The Supreme Court just stopped counting the votes.
Yeah, that was that whole Florida thing, right?
Florida thing, and I was incredibly devastated. And I'm so glad that I had that experience early in my political career, because I worked on a lot of races after that, and you take L's. I mean, you take L's in politics. And so that was my first major campaign loss, where he had everything, the money, the power, the access, the name, the support system, the endorsements.
Mm-hmm.
Lost. And
I know he probably felt bad, like, damn, how I messed this up. That's tough. So this is the first time that we actually talk about a loss for Omarosa. How does Omarosa deal with things like that, with the loss? Because that's got to be, because like you're raising money. I'm sure it's tough raising money, but when it's like a sure thing, it's kind of like a little bit easier to raise money because people are kind of really giving you money so that you can, because they think they're going to be taken care of later. Right. So now when they get that L, like, so how do you deal with defeat, like that?
Well, I did. I went through a tough, that was a tough L. I mean, that was a tough fall. I remember I was unemployed. And I also thought, oh, I'm going back into the White House for 4 more years. So I thought that I had my next 4 years mapped out because Gore was going to be president. And I was going to go back and work in the White House and maybe work in an agency or something. So I had, for the first time, I didn't have a plan.
Man.
I did not have a plan because I just knew I was going to be the director of some agency, or I was going to go work at the World Bank or something exciting, because I had been a loyal political operative for the
Right.
party.
And you were like making the right moves. You went from Clinton to Al Gore is probably, you thinking he at least gonna do another 4 to 8 years. And
Yes.
then you can parlay that situation to another situation. And this man, drops the ball. Well, not drops the ball, but I guess life happens and he takes an L. So, was that like the lowest point to date? Obviously you lost your father, but in terms of an adult, was that like the lowest point? Because being unemployed, especially when you got high standards for yourself and you're used to making appearances, that's tough.
Yeah, I was unemployed. However, I did marry my Howard sweetheart.
Oh,
And
your husband went to Howard?
my husband, my first husband, thank you, I'm remarried. But
Oh, okay.
husband at the time went to Howard School of Business, and he was working, thank God, and I was collecting unemployment. So
Ah, okay.
I had a bit of a cushion in the sense that he
Well,
went.
you're still technically working for the government at that point, getting unemployment checks, I guess. I don't know. So, so public servant. Okay. So that was tough. How did you pick yourself up? What's the plan at that point?
I started teaching at a charter school. I taught at Maya Angelou Public Charter School on
Nice.
no, 9th Street, T Street, yes, and I loved it. I loved it. I was
What subject did you teach?
communications.
Okay. No, I taught for 7 years in Chicago public school.
Yeah.
So I can I know that struggle. Well, not struggle, but I know that blessing, I should say. Thank you for joining the HU Movemaker podcast, where we highlight folks that have contributed to the Howard legacy at the highest levels. To hear more interviews or purchase merchandise, please visit www.humovemakers.com.